Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. In this episode, the Navy women's lacrosse team will be front and center in our deep dive segment. And just like in our last episode when we covered the men's team, I'll have a terrific guest joining me for that discussion. The winter sports are winding down and the spring season is now ramping up. So stay with us and I'll tell you all about it. Okay, it is great to have you with us here today, and whether you are a returning listener or checking us out for the first time, thanks for making us part of your day. Since our last conversation, the Mids have picked up a couple more Patriot League championships. We're going to get to that in a minute because I wanted to start off this sports update by talking about wrestling. Navy is sending 5 wrestlers to the NCAA championships next week. The Mids competed in the Eastern Intercollegiate Wrestling Association championships this past weekend. It's kind of a mouthful. We're just going to go with EIWA from now on. So in these championships, anyone finishing 4th or higher earns an automatic bid to the NCAAs. So here are your qualifiers, and we're going to start with 4th place first. We've got Brendan Ferretti at 133 pounds and Jacob Kozer at 197. Navy's 2 third-place qualifiers were Josh Coderhant at 147 and David Key at 174. And then finally, Grady Grease at 285 pounds capped off an outstanding tournament by scoring 4 points in the last 12 seconds to win the heavyweight championship. And I do have to apologize. I believe in our last episode, I did pronounce Grady's last name as Grice. So sorry about that, Grady. It is Grease, in fact. And I got to tell you, that last match was really amazing. I didn't see the whole thing because Flow Wrestling carries those tournaments. And like I said, they're a little bit pricey on their subscription. But the good thing was that Navy Athletics posted the last 12 to 15 seconds on their Twitter account. It was a pretty amazing finish. And it looked like it was headed to overtime. Grease's opponent was Nathan Taylor from Lehigh. The two had actually squared off earlier this season in their dual meet, and Grease won that one pretty easily. The score was 9-1. This match was a lot tighter, though, because with less than 15 seconds left, it was tied at 1-1. So in the clip that I saw, you could see that Grease was in control, and it looked like Taylor was trying to earn an escape right as time was about to run out. But Grease was just too quick. He not only got the takedown, but he also put Taylor on his back and picked up 2 more points for the near fall. So the final score was 5-1, and it was just an awesome finish. I just can't believe how guys that big can be so quick. It was just like in a blink of an eye that Grease had basically kept him from escaping, and he maintained control of the leg, but he was able to leverage his body to put Taylor on his back. So pretty impressive stuff. The NCAA championships will start on March 16th in Tulsa, and they're typically carried by ESPN. I didn't see that noted on the schedule because normally they mention who's got the TV coverage, but we'll find out for sure next week. So congratulations to all 5 mids who are going to be headed to the NCAA championships in wrestling. I'm definitely going to be checking that out when the time comes. Next, I wanted to quickly recap 2 games that the Navy women's lacrosse team played over the weekend. On Friday night, they took on the Oregon Ducks at home, and the weather for that game was just absolutely awful. I remember last year, the mids' first home game, just like this year, the weather was just atrocious. I mean, it was pouring down rain, and it was pretty cold out there too, although I don't know if it was as cold as last year. But it started out just as a gentle mist, but then it just got worse and worse as the game wore on, and by the time you got into the third quarter, it was just a steady rain. But that didn't seem to bother the mids at first. They got off to a quick 4-1 lead in the first quarter, and then Oregon finally started to kind of get some rhythm going. They scored 3 goals in the second, and they were able to win that quarter, and they closed the gap to 2 goals. They were trailing 7-5 at halftime. Coach Tim Shaw made a couple of adjustments in the locker room, and the offense came out in the third quarter and put 4 goals up. But the most impressive thing was that the defense pitched a shutout. That made the score 11-5 going into the fourth quarter. And from there, the team scored 4 goals each, with Navy getting the win by a score of 15-9. It was a great effort in some really lousy conditions, and it was a solid win for the mids. They took care of business against an opponent in Oregon that was decent, but I didn't expect the team to have much of a problem with them. Now, the game on Sunday was a different story. The team had to travel about 2.5 hours down I-95 to take on the Richmond Spiders, who were ranked 18th in the country. I knew the mids had a decent shot at winning this game if they played well. They have managed to knock off a ranked opponent every year since 2017, except for that shortened COVID season in 2021. And when they came out on Sunday, the offense was firing on all cylinders from the very beginning. They scored 7 goals in the first quarter, but the game was still pretty close at the half, with the team hanging on to a 10-8 lead. Now, in the second half, the defense completely shut Richmond down. The Spiders only scored one goal, and our offensive unit never found the back of the net after they scored their ninth goal with about 3 minutes to go in the third quarter. So basically, for the last 18 minutes of the game, they were just coming up empty. The final score was 20-9. It was a terrific win for the program. And Coach Timshaw, even though she's got a young squad, they look like they're improving with every game. Going back to that Oregon game, the offense definitely had to adapt to the rainy conditions. In those games, there tends to be less passing because of the increased potential for a turnover. But despite that, 11 of Navy's 15 goals came off of an assist. And you're going to hear about several of the key players who figured in that win, in addition to the one against Richmond in our deep dive segment. And I think you're really going to enjoy that, even if you're new to lacrosse, because I'm telling you right now, our guest is awesome. Okay, there's just a couple more things I wanted to mention in case you missed it. Both the men's and women's indoor track and field teams defended their Patriot League titles back on February 26th. The men finished with 257 points, which was 118 better than Boston University. The mids won 8 of 18 events and clinched their third straight title. Jacques Guillaume won the Athlete of the Meet award for being the highest point producer. In the women's meet, the mids took home their fourth straight title, outscoring Boston University 214.5 to 136. They won 7 of 18 events, and Molly Chapman came away with the Athlete of the Meet honors there. Both teams will basically roll right into the outdoor season, and the one thing I'm looking forward to is April 22nd, because Navy will be hosting an invitational, and that happens to be the same weekend that I'll be back in town for the Army-Navy lacrosse game. So I'll definitely be checking that out. All right, before we take our break, I'm going to go ahead and knock out our Ask Me Anything segment. And it looks like you guys have been pretty busy, because I only had one question this time, and it was from our man W.T. Dorr. I guess it's kind of cool that I can expect to hear from him. Anyway, he asked me this. He says, "Hey, I saw that the men's and women's swimming and diving teams just won the Eastern College Athletic Conference Championships a couple of weekends ago. I thought the mids were in the Patriot League. Do they actually belong to two different conferences? I didn't think programs could do that. How does that even work?" So, Mr. Dorr, thanks again for another great question. And here's the story on that. The Eastern College Athletic Conference, which is more commonly known as the ECAC, has been around for about 80 years. There are about 200 schools that are members across Division 1, 2, and 3. And of those schools, 77 of them compete at the Division 1 level. Many of them, like Navy, do belong to other conferences, which is their primary one. For instance, obviously Navy's in the Patriot League for swimming, track, and a number of others. But the big difference is that for main sports, the ECAC doesn't really have a regular season, since most of these schools do belong to other conferences. What they do offer is another opportunity for athletes to compete at a championship level, usually by hosting a tournament or something like that. And oftentimes, these, for instance, track, for example, it serves as an opportunity for an athlete to get another NCAA qualifying time or distance or whatever, depending on what their event is. And being in the ECAC also adds to the athlete's experience by being able to compete outside their normal conference, especially if there isn't an NCAA bid in an individual or team's future. So, Mr. Dorr, I hope that answers your question. Keep them coming. And that goes for the rest of you guys, too. Let's not have old WT doing all the heavy lifting there. So I look forward to getting a few more questions next time. Okay, that does it for Ask Me Anything, and our deep dive segment is next, so don't go anywhere. Okay, it is time for our deep dive segment, and I am very excited to welcome our next guest. In fact, we were introduced by Bob Carolla, my guest on the previous episode when we talked about the Navy men's lacrosse team. Her name is Cynthia Lisa, and she is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy class of 2000. While at Navy, she was a 4-year starter at midfield, and she was also the team captain and club president of the Navy women's club lacrosse team prior to its transition to Division I. And during her time at Annapolis, the Mids were 3-time national club champions, by the way. After commissioning, Cynthia enjoyed a career as a naval aviator flying the EA-6B Prowler, which was the fleet's primary electronic countermeasures platform at the time. In fact, it was just recently retired about 4 years ago. Cynthia began her coaching career while on active duty, and it now spans 17 years. She's coached at every level of youth, club, and high school lacrosse, and she also started 2 lacrosse clubs while stationed with her husband up at NAS Whidbey Island in Washington. Her players have earned USA Lacrosse, All-American, Academic All-American, Conference Player of the Year, and numerous other local and regional honors, as well as having gone on to play Division I, II, and III lacrosse at the college level. She's in her 5th season as a head coach of Leonardtown High School and also serves as the president of the St. Mary's Girls Lacrosse League, in addition to being both the director of coaching and the coach for the Southern Maryland Jets lacrosse club team. So as you can tell, we're going to be talking with a subject matter expert here when it comes to women's lacrosse. Cynthia, it is so great to have you join me today. I am really looking forward to talking with you about Navy women's lacrosse, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I love lacrosse, love Navy. So thank you for having me.
All right, so let's go ahead and get right into it then. And I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. So when were you first exposed to lacrosse, and how did you get hooked on it?
Well, I'm from Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. But I actually didn't start playing lacrosse until my freshman year in high school. I was an avid athlete growing up in the 80s. There weren't a ton of opportunities for girls, even though we were post-Title IX. You know, I had to play Little League with the boys at some point, and everyone kind of transitioned to these different sports. But my family, we were big time swimmers. So year-round swimming kind of took up a lot of my time. Went into high school as a year-round swimmer. Our high school swim team was very successful. And I said to my dad, I really want to try lacrosse. My dad's from West Virginia, and he thought I meant rugby. So he was like, no way are you playing this sport? I said, come on, Dad. So we went to the local mall and went to the sporting goods store that was in the mall and got a stick. So I show up for tryouts, never having played, never anything, but I was pretty athletic. I think I was the fastest mile runner out there, and brought my stick out, and it was a boy's stick. So there was a lot of learning, but I started playing that freshman year, and I was actually only able to play for a few weeks because I was still swimming, and it was big time championship season. So it didn't last long. I was playing lacrosse for 2 hours after school, getting on a train, meeting my mom, and she would take me to swim practice, and then swimming. So I think that lasted about 3 weeks, and my knees didn't really love that. So I stopped playing, but after that, I gave up full-time year-round swimming because I knew I wanted to play 3 high school sports, and then came back as a sophomore and ended up being a starter that year on the varsity team. So from there, it just kind of took off, my love for it. We didn't have the club teams. We didn't have all the tournament opportunities that you have now. So really it was high school lacrosse is really what you played. We started towards the end of my high school career playing kind of some winter indoor, and every once in a while there'd be a random tournament or something like that. But it was nothing like it is today. So my experience was kind of limited, but I loved it. I loved the sport.
Right. So you've had that career in high school. And what I'm curious to know is that even at that point in time, I don't know, did they have a lot of collegiate lacrosse programs? Because now what I'm asking here is if you had excelled at the high school level, right, and you're looking for an opportunity to play in college, you wound up at the Naval Academy, which clearly didn't have a varsity program at the time. So what led you to the academy itself?
So the funny thing is, to this day, we still argue about who got interested in the academy story. My dad would take each one of us as a junior on spring break on your college tour. So my college tour that year was the University of Virginia, Georgetown, and both my parents are Georgetown grads, and then the Naval Academy. And we argue whose idea was it to go see the Naval Academy. I walked onto the Naval Academy and said, I want to go here. That feeling of it's just the most beautiful place in the world. It's so special. There's, everyone's in uniform. Everyone's kind of doing something, that means something more. Lacrosse was kind of the icing on the cake. I said, oh, I can play lacrosse here. That's fantastic. I didn't even think about playing lacrosse in college, even though I had attended in the past a summer camp in New Jersey. And I remember at the time, some of the college coaches there had said, we'd love to make you a defender. I was always a midi. And we think you could really excel at that. And I wasn't thinking about playing in college. I wasn't thinking ahead like, hey, this could be something. Because if I had, I would have said, sure, I'll do whatever you want, take me on your team. But for me, it was really about where is my future and where do I want to go to school? I think recruiting at the time was really kind of focused around some, Baltimore-based schools and maybe some Long Island schools. And they would go to those schools. They knew the girls were getting excellent coaching there and were successful and things like that. My high school in Common Station, New Jersey, I graduated with 42 girls. So no one was coming to our school to look for athletes,
Right.
So recruiting, I didn't even really know it was a thing other than from the swimming side of it. If you swim and you have those times and there's, local, regional, national meets, you're going to get noticed for your times.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I didn't really know that it was a thing, but I knew I wanted to go to Navy after I visited, and I knew that what I could do after graduation. And then I was reading the pamphlet and it says Club Lacrosse program for women. I was like, all right, I'm sold on this. So that's kind of what led me to the academy. And then I knew that I could play lacrosse there.
Awesome. Now, before we get too deep into the lacrosse discussion, and believe me, I can make a pretty deep dive on this one, but I wanted to kind of get a sense for what your Navy career was like, or Marine Corps career. It's always kind of a fun thing to talk about with the guests on the show who did go to the academy. So if you could just walk us through your progression, starting with, say, service selection, and then we can just go from there.
Sure. I always knew that I wanted to fly, and specifically I wanted to fly jets. So I service selected Navy pilot. My career started like every other naval aviator in Pensacola. Spent about 6 weeks to 8 weeks in Pensacola before going to Corpus Christi, where I went to primary. Out of primary, I was fortunate to select jets. If you can, think about the timeline of my history, I graduated high school in 96, graduated college in 2000. The combat exclusion law wasn't even repealed until 94. So women in jets were very, very new still.
Mm-hmm.
So when I selected jets, I remember the instructors told me we haven't had a female select jets in a really long time. So, which is good and it's bad. I went down to Kingsville, Texas. During advanced in Kingsville, I became engaged to my husband, who I had started dating at the academy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in Meridian about a month ahead of me. So we knew he was going to get winged first. I was going to get winged second. So everything was kind of hedging on what he would get. He was selected for Prowlers, which, if you know anything about the Prowler, and maybe listeners do, maybe listeners don't, the biggest pressure for a Prowler is landing on the boat.
Right.
So here I am gearing up to go land on the aircraft carrier for the first time. And they told me, as long as you do well, we'll get you a Prowler spot, so no pressure. But fortunately I did well enough. I would equate my flying to my, athleticism. I am a great daytime pilot when I can feel that plane. I can see what's outside, just natural at that. And then you turn the lights off at night and it goes. I'm not a great instrument pilot, let's just say that. So landing on the boat at night in the Prowler was always fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I selected Prowlers, went up to Whidbey Island, where I trained for a year in the RAG. Once I got my wings, I was sent to VAQ 135. Not every squadron had females, so that was actually something they had to consider.
Uh-huh.
VAQ 135 was in CAG 11 at the time, and we were attached to the USS Nimitz.
Okay.
So I actually joined the squadron about, I think, like a month or two after they got back from a deployment. So I got to be fresh JO through the entire workup deployment cycle, which was, very cool to experience it as a young JO and everything. I got to be an LSO, which is probably my favorite. Yeah, that's probably my favorite job in the Navy. And I think what, kind of led to me wanting to coach, because you're basically just coaching the pilots down. I was the first woman in the Prowler world to get a wing qual for LSO, and that was exciting.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, real quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I flew helicopters when I was in the Navy, and a couple of times we'd be on a carrier and, of course, run into a classmate from a jet squadron or whatever. But I had an opportunity to get down onto the LSO platform one day when one of my classmates, Al Grosskurt, said, "Hey, if you got some time, come on down to the platform, we'll show you how we do things." And that was the most incredible experience, because I'm looking at these planes, and I think they were landing A7s, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm looking at these things come in, and I'm thinking, okay, there's no way he catches that 3-wire from that angle. And sure enough, somehow he managed to come down and grab it, so that was pretty cool. So yeah, when you said LSO, I had to jump in there and share that story, because that was one of my most enjoyable times on a carrier. Is just watching Al do his job.
Mine too. I mean, we were in LSO teams, and it was just such a incredible experience being able to do that, especially everybody can wave on the beautiful, clear, flat days. But when there was pitching deck, and I remember we had a pitching deck recovery in the daytime, and I was, on the mic guiding people down, and the CAD came in, and this is a proud moment for me. He came in and said, "Your timing was right. Your calls were right." And, and I, like I said, I equate this now to coaching. It's really what cues can you get that person
right
that they need at the right time. You can bombard them with information. You could sit back and do nothing. But it's all about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I loved being an LSO.
Yeah. What a great coaching analogy too. I like that. And I hadn't really thought about the rhythm that you have to get into and feeding them information and stuff like that to get them down safely. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it was awesome. We deployed in 2005 on the Nimitz for Operation Iraqi Freedom. If you've seen the PBS documentary Carrier, that's my deployment. So we're on that. We had that crazy pitching deck night, which if you watch the documentary, they have me on the platform that night, but I was actually in the air. So I would, if anyone wants to know what it's like to land an aircraft carrier in blue water on a pitching deck night, that episode alone is fantastic. But
right.
Came back from deployment. We were set to rotate out of our junior officer tours. My husband got picked up for this is a crazy story. My husband got picked up for test pilot school in Patuxent River, and I was scheduled to go be a RAG instructor, remain and would be a RAG instructor, be a RAG LSO. And the same week that he got picked up for TPS, I actually ejected out of a Prowler.
Whoa. Okay. I got to hear this story. Jeez.
I'll give you the real short version. Cause I've done podcasts actually talking about the ejection, but yeah, it was a section low in March, coming up on the 17th anniversary, I guess, of it, March 3rd. So so we were flying a section low. I was a section lead, another junior officer. And long story short, we had a leak in one of our oil nozzles, so eventually the oil ran out, which there was no oil going to that piece right there. The bearing overheated. And then, essentially almost disintegrated, came apart, dropping the turbine shaft.
Oh my God.
The turbine blades exited the plane, all of this. So really what happened for us internally was we were flying up over a hill. We were actually straight and level at the time. Got a noise, got some bad indications on the engine, pulled away from the ground as, we got smoke and fumes in the cockpit, very rocky ride, looked down, engine, ground's getting a lot bigger. Came back. I had no controls. We had smoke. Almost all my fire lights were on. And at that point, when you have smoke, when you have smoke in the cockpit and you have fire lights, it's a confirmed fire. So your only choice at that point too is eject. And thankfully, I was able to eject as the pilot in the Prowler. You're the last one out. And really my size, because I'm only about 5'4.5", much smaller than your average male. So I got a little extra boost in the rocket motor on the ejection seat, and was able to survive. Everyone survived. The worst injury was one of my backseaters, and he really hurt his back badly and one of his legs. So live to tell that story.
Yeah, wow. So just to confirm, the Prowler's got a crew of 4. Is that correct?
4.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So my goodness, that's...
Yep. So that
crazy story. And so thankful that everybody walked away from that one, more or less, right?
Yeah, definitely. The Martin Baker Tie Club, if you've heard of it, is not a club you necessarily want to be in, but you're happy to be in.
Right.
And grateful to all the people who work on ejection seats and the parachutes. And my parachute only half opened, and I still survived. And, it was kind of for a worst case scenario, it was best case scenario that everyone, lived and is fine today. But that kind of changes your perspective on flying. And I didn't know that flying RAG students around, especially in the Prowler, the first couple of flights for a pilot, there's a pilot in the right seat. And with my husband getting sent to the East Coast, we kind of reevaluated. And I said, all right, let's just go. I'll take non-flying tours so I can, see if I still want to keep flying and still want to do this. And that led me to come here to PAX. And as we were house hunting here in Southern Maryland, I saw some young girls playing lacrosse in a random field. And I said, I know what I can do. I can coach. So I reached out to the local club, and that kind of set me on the path for coaching.
All right. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
okay, I gotta say, I did not see the ejection story coming.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's
yeah, I should have warned you.
No, that's fascinating. So all right, so now let's kind of get into the discussion of the game itself, okay? And thanks for sharing your story and your career. It's always a great thing for me to hear. So let's talk a little bit about just comparing the two games themselves, the men's game and the women's game, because there's some differences, and I don't know all of them. So I was wondering if you could just kind of point out maybe 2 or 3 of the main differences between the men's game and the women's game.
Well, I'll give you the party answer is the men's game is a lot more physical because they wear a lot of padding.
Mm-hmm.
But I would, encourage anyone to watch the women's game now, and the speed and the physicality of the game is just unbelievable. There's a little bit different in positioning. We have more players out on the field. We have 11. So we have an extra attacker and an extra defender out there than the men, who can, who really don't go both ways. The sticks are a little bit different, the women's equipment in general, right? The men wear pads, the sticks you have some long sticks, you have the shorty sticks on the men's side, the pockets are different. But I would say as far as the actual game is played, the games really are mirroring each other more and more as both games progress. Yeah. It's been fascinating to watch. But I would think I've coached a little bit of boys too. And I think, the concepts are the same. The ideas are the same. It's just a matter of what you can do, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, kind of.
Right. And that's the first thing I noticed too, when you obviously look at the game, the first thing you see is, wow, those athletes aren't wearing any helmets, And I tell you, I've been hit on a follow through in the head with a stick with a helmet on, and it hurt like crazy. And I've seen the women get hit, take shots off the shoulder and stuff like that. So, hats off to you, to be able to withstand that. I guess my next question along those lines is, do you ever see, given the fact that, the women are becoming faster, more athletic and everything every single day, do you see equipment gravitating to the point where they will have a little bit more protection?
That's the big debate with women's lacrosse is, are we going to go to helmets? The state of Florida mandated helmets for their players in the high school realm. But I don't see the game going to helmets in the next year or two, maybe ultimately. But I do think, 2 parts of that. I lost 2 players last year to concussion from either hits on the head or being forced to the ground. And some of it was repetitive, but I think in watching the college game this year and some of the more physical games too, I think the refs are trying to rein it in more, because that is really what the answer is. It's not put more padding on them and let them get away with it. It's let's control the game.
Understood. Yeah.
A lot of times too, you see with inexperienced players or, maybe who are less skilled, they're going to rely on that physicality, and that's just a recipe for disaster. So I think that, I think, and I'm hopeful that USA Lacrosse is really going to try and just regulate it more and continue to push, back on the dangerous play.
Right. And along those lines, when you're looking at that, and then as a coach, you're looking to encourage more young women to come into the sport and stuff like that, because let's face it, there's a ton of advantages that you can speak to, but I'm kind of curious what that, for lack of a better phrase, sales pitch sounds like. For instance, you see somebody who you think has got some real potential, but has never played before. Talk to me a little bit about what that sales pitch sounds like. And then the second part of that question is, have you ever brought somebody on who'd never picked up a stick before that just totally exceeded your expectations?
Absolutely. Every year, I will say that Navy, in my day in the club program, we relied on some of those players, who had never played, but were just incredibly athletic, and we'll said, hey, we'll get you to that point. And if you listen to, Kelly Montehiller or even Cindy Timshaw talk about some of these players that they have recruited, it's the same deal. They'll see a soccer player running out there, on campus or something and go, hey, come here, I can teach you the skills that you want. I think you have to have, validity in your program and confidence in yourself as a coach, to recruit those kind of athletes. Lacrosse is, it's hard to find people who don't love lacrosse. And if they don't love lacrosse, it's usually because they don't like to get physical and they don't like to run. And even those who don't like to run, I can still usually recruit some of those. But I tell them the experience they're going to have is going to be a positive experience. I always try to have a very positive environment. Building confidence in athletes, no matter if they're my best player or they're barely seeing the field, they deserve to have confidence in what they're doing and who they are. But again, it's such a fast-paced game. It's always changing. It's lots of fun. You are gonna get, just such a good, everyone just has fun out there playing lacrosse. So that's usually what I'm talking to them about. And what are your other options for this time frame, in spring? Right. What other sport are you going to play? And what other sports do you play? I try to appeal hey, this works great across any sport that you play. If you're a runner, here's a way to run, but maybe a different kind of running. Soccer, all the fall sports, soccer, field hockey, all of those are great translatable sports that girls can not use the same muscles that they're using in their primary sport all the time, get a different set of muscles going, but have a great experience and a lot of fun.
Right. Okay. Very cool. So this is one question I've been looking to ask somebody who coaches at the high school level, and that is the type of communication that goes on between high school coaches and coaches of college programs for your players who you believe will be able to play at the next level. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, how long have you been coaching? And secondly, how long does it take to develop those kinds of relationships with those schools?
So I've been coaching since I first came here in 2006. But it's been, my husband's been active duty until just last month. So we've been back and forth to the West Coast. We were in Japan. So my coaching career is wherever I can coach, wherever I am, I'll try and find a team. It's an interesting question because for us, a lot of the primary recruiting avenue is the club travel team.
Yeah.
And that is where you're getting recruited out of. And most of your communication is coming from, and to. As a high school coach, and it depends kind of which high school, there's definitely the top 20 in the country high schools where those high school coaches are probably communicating a significant amount with college coaches, but it's really on the club side. And most clubs have a director of recruiting, or some level like that they are in constant communication with college coaches. As a high school coach who may not be their club coach, I try to, get out of the girls what they're looking for, where they're trying to go, and then communicate with those coaches specifically. If they're coming for a prospect day, I'll try and reach out and say, hey, here's what I know. Here's what, sometimes their stat sheet may not be as significant, but I can give that coach some of the intangibles that they might not have seen on, just hey, this many goals, this many, this and that. So I try to communicate things like that. Recruiting in general, though, we really emphasize that the girls, the athletes have to be the ones to drive that train and be in control of their own future. If a player comes to me and says, hey, I want to play in college, I'm going to turn them back around and go, you need to start looking, cast a wide net, discover what you want from a college first. Because we have different experience in college than every other, but 3 or 4 schools. And their futures are still undetermined. So the ultimate goal is getting them, if they want to play in college, getting them to a place where they want to either be a part of a championship team and play, or maybe not play, or just be a starter. They have to kind of figure that out. But ultimately, what are you going to do beyond that? So we try to piece all of this together with the athletes and then go from there in our communications.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. And, my son played basketball in high school and growing up. That was basically when he focused on. And it was the same thing there, as you probably know. Most of the attention that the players got came through the club. And I made a decision back with him when he was about 10 or 11, because we played club for a few years. And then I saw that he wasn't really having a lot of fun. And I knew he had a lot of potential. So I just said, look, here's the deal. I said, you are really, really good at this sport at the level that you're at, but I don't want you to lose your love for the game. So let's take a step back from the whole club playing and just focus on, playing at the rec level. And then we were fortunate enough to get him a really good skills coach. And he was undersized. I mean, he was a young kid. I mean, he's got a December birthday, and he went into ninth grade and he was only 13 years old. So he was always tracking a year behind everybody physically. But long story short, he stuck at it. He ended up, he made the freshman team, did not get selected for the team the next year because it jumped right to JV and he was still growing. But then he played, junior and senior year, and he's the most valuable player his last year.
That's amazing.
And but the thing was with him, to me, it was so much about him just enjoying the game. And I knew that he loved basketball, but he did not eat, sleep, and drink it, right? And to play at the next level, that's what you have to do. I mean, that's just the way it is now, right? And one day after the season was over, we were shooting at Luke Air Force Base, and he was going to go to 2 years at a community college and then just transfer to ASU. And I said, Glendale Community's got a pretty good basketball team. I said, what do you think about walking on there? And he says, no, Dad, I've had my fun. I'm done. I just want to just play for fun now. And I said, fine with me. I said, you've gotten everything out of this experience that I wanted you to get out of it, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it. And I feel like I'm a part of it. I'm president of a rec league. I coach travel, I'm a director on the travel side. I've got, the high school kids, and parents have lost their minds, I mean, it's such it doesn't matter if you are, especially a sport like lacrosse. It's not, we're trying to get it in the Olympics. The professional leagues are still trying to figure it out, but you will stop playing lacrosse at some point.
Right.
So what are you going to do when that happens? And you might want to, still be around the game, and you could coach and do things like that, but how are you going to get to that point? And what are you going to do when it's over? And, that's ultimately the goal, is raising these kids who, have a future no matter what they end up doing. So yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. So I got two more questions on the game itself, and then we can kind of move into some of the Navy players that I want to discuss. So let's talk a little bit about changes to the game over the last 20 years or so. Which ones do you think have had the most positive impact besides the shot clock? Because Bob and I talked about the shot clock, which I thought was a great innovation, and that has done wonders for really kind of picking up the speed of the game. Are there any others that stand out in your mind?
Well, it's so funny because, you talked about the shot clock, but when I started playing, we didn't have boundaries.
Oh, right.
Literally.
I remember.
Literally no boundaries. So you'd show up to a game and the refs would be like, okay, see that tree line and that over there. To me, my first Navy sweatshirt says like no limits, no boundaries, like literally. And I'm sure my teammates are laughing about it. They added in the restraining line, I think when I was a sophomore. But that adding that in was massive, because then you had to be limited where you went and things like that.
Uh-huh.
But the game, I mean, I didn't play with goggles. I took a check to the head, in an Army game, and it was, like, okay, no big deal. So there's been a lot of changes. I think, the equipment is probably one of the biggest changes that I've seen. Like you mentioned your wooden stick that we started with. I started with a wooden stick. The sticks now are unbelievable. My middle daughter, I tell this to a lot of the parents who ask me about sticks and things like that. I put her in a mesh stick in about fourth grade. And that was like the first time women could have mesh. And it helped her stick skills and her confidence just tremendously. Mm-hmm. So the innovation of the sticks, and there being specific sticks for certain positions, there's draw specific sticks. There's specific sticks if you're an attacker. It's incredible to watch. You talked about the shot clock. One of the things that in the college game that we haven't seen in the high school game is running through the crease as a defender. And the men can do that, but we can't do that at our high school, in our high school league. Uh-huh. Some of the high school leagues are able to do it. Some of the private leagues. I think that changes the game tremendously, because that crease, if you can't go in it as a defender, it's just a foot race,
right.
Kind of around it. But I'm trying to think what else. It's just been, I think, the equipment, the speed, the physicality, the change. We had 5 in the midfield, so we had 5 midfielders. instead of 3 midfielders, 4 attack and 4D, which is how it's played now.
Wow.
Yeah, those are some of the things that I've noticed in the game. But I think the shot clock has been incredible. I hope we get it at the high school level at some point.
Oh, okay.
We don't have it at the high school level.
Understood. Okay, got it. Now, Bob and I were talking about this. The women's game instituted the shot clock in college in, I believe, 2017. The men followed like a year or two later. So that's one example of the men's program looking at an innovation that the women's side made and saying, okay, we've got to do that. Do you see an aspect of the men's game that you would like to see incorporated on the women's side?
Yeah, so I'll give you another innovation that just came to us recently, and you're probably going to laugh about this one. It used to be in the women's game, when a whistle was blown, everyone had to freeze.
Uh-huh.
So everybody on the field would freeze. And
you mean like red light, green light stuff? Or
yes, 100%. Exactly. So just a few years ago, they allowed us to have free movement. So it used to be, so kids coming from other sports were like, why am I stopping? So we'd have to practice, especially with the younger ones, stopping on the whistle. So then when we went to free movement, I had a couple players bring this up recently. I literally practiced with them moving on the whistle. So I'd blow a whistle and be like, move, come on, move, and it took a long time to get used to it. That has changed the game tremendously on the women's side. And that I'm sure came from the boys.
Wow.
The other thing that we just got recently was self-starts. So you used to have to wait. If a whistle blew and a foul happened, you used to have to stop, even if everybody else could move. But now you can, depending on the situation, you can just pick up and keep going, and it keeps the game moving at a faster pace. And that's always been the biggest kind of complaint about women's lacrosse and maybe even men's lacrosse in some aspect, is keeping it exciting and keeping it moving. And people want to see goals. They want to see the action. So all these rules have really come from it. I think what you're starting to see too, and maybe not starting, it's been happening for a while, is so much of the men's game has matriculated into the women's game. The outside shots, the toe drags, the 2-man game is huge now. And all of that comes from inspiration from the men. So
okay.
It's
all right.
It's always great to watch, and watching the men play. I used to watch a lot more men than I do now. I just don't have the time as much.
Right.
But the ball movement, the way that they shoot from so far out, women are just starting to really pick up on that. And it also goes back to the physicality of it, right? And women are stronger now, they're faster now, so they can pick up on those nuances. And the sticks, like I mentioned, the sticks before, it was like a tennis racket. You're not shooting from the 8-meter with that.
Right.
With the new sticks, you definitely have more of a feel like a men's stick that you can shoot from far out.
Right. Okay, cool. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a short break right now. And when we come back, Cynthia and I are going to continue our conversation on the Navy women's lacrosse team and some of their key players. Stay with us. Okay, welcome back to Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and I'm joined by Cynthia Lisa, who is here to help me break down the Navy women's lacrosse team. She graduated from the academy in the year 2000 and is a former player who is now a coach. So, Cynthia, before we pick back up with our conversation, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about your team and the other lacrosse organizations you're involved with down in the Pax River area. So, go ahead and fire away.
Yeah, so I'm the varsity head coach at Leonardtown High School. Go Raiders! We are just about to kick off our season with tryouts coming up. This is my 5th year, I believe, 1920. Yep, as the head coach there. We've got a younger team, but an exciting team, a lot of returning talent. My seniors have been so involved with the program this year and really excited. It's the most girls I've seen out at winter conditioning, excited to play and come try out. So I'm really excited to get that season underway. They are so hardworking. They believe in each other. They believe in everything that Raiders stand for. So I'm excited. I'm always excited to be out there with the high schoolers every single day. My oldest is trying out for the team this year, so that brings a new element to the program. And she has to work 3 times as hard as everyone else. So
That's right. That's right.
But I also am very involved in the community. I'm the president of St. Mary's Girls Lacrosse League. I've actually been involved with the league since I first moved in 2006. But I took over as president when we moved back here in 2018. We've doubled our numbers since I returned, and we have another youth league that kicks off on Monday. I think we've got 220 girls maybe in the youth league. We are truly a rec league. And, you mentioned your son playing rec basketball. I firmly believe in the power of rec lacrosse. We have, what makes me most excited every year are the brand new 7th and 8th grade girls that come out and try it simply because they either need another sport, their friends are playing, or they move to the area and they're looking to get involved. I love that. I love that we have girls who've been playing since they were born and girls who are brand new to the sport, all on the same team, working together and just having fun. I don't think you can take that experience away. I think it's incredibly valid. And then I'm a coach and director with Jets Lacrosse Club. We're the competitive travel branch of the St. Mary's Girls Lacrosse League. We have high school and youth teams. I've been helping out with the 2028 team, the Jets White, because I used to coach the older ones, but the way the rules are as a high school coach, if you have a certain number of returning players on that travel team, you can't coach them. So I had to pass along my older ones to some incredibly great coaches that took on that team. So I'm helping with the younger ones now. But all of those things keep my spring, summer, fall, everything busy. So
yeah, I'm sure. It sounds like it. Okay, so what I want to do now is talk about some of the key players on the Navy team. And this year, I was listening to Coach Tim Shaw's interview from, I guess, a few weeks ago after a game. And she'd mentioned that this year's team is fairly young because they lost a lot of really productive seniors. Reagan Roloffs was one of them. I mean, she was just like a dead lock on draw controls. I mean, she I don't know what her percentage was, but it was incredibly high. And she's one of the higher scorers as well. But here are some of the players that I've been kind of keeping my eye on. And you being in Pax River, maybe you've heard these names before. Maybe you've even gone against them. I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and start with Emily Massinis, who, and I'm pretty sure I'm getting that right. I went to the old media guide for the pronunciation on that one. She is a midfielder from Manchester, Maryland, which obviously is pretty far north of where you are. But Emily is a sophomore, and last year she started 5 games. Unfortunately, she got hurt and missed the rest of the season with an injury, but she has gotten off to a really great start this year. Massinis is second on the team in points through 3 games and also leads in draw controls. I want to talk to you a little bit about that because obviously that's a little bit different in terms of the face-off with the men. It's done basically from a standing position. So could you, first of all, kind of walk through that? And then secondly, talk about how important controlling that particular stat is in terms of developing your offensive scheme for the rest of the game.
You'll hear it a lot of times in the women's game, sometimes on the sideline. You win the draw, you win the game, or you win the draw, you rule the world. The draw is so incredibly important. It's a highly tactical position, as well as strength and speed. And if you can find that person who, or maybe you have a couple people, every team is different. Sometimes you have that person on the draw who is excellent at getting the draw to themselves. Sometimes they're excellent at getting to the circle players, and the circle players become the most important part of that draw aspect. When I teach the draw to young lacrosse players, I teach it as a team. You're a draw team. You're not a draw taker. You're not on the circle. You are a team. And if you don't know what your team is doing and that connection, then you're not going to win the draw. But, if Emily can power through and really take control of the draws for Navy, that is going to be a game changer for that team this year because, we know if they don't have the ball, they can't score. So as long as we're winning the draw and keeping it on our end, that'll be key to their game.
All right. Good stuff. This next player, her name is Ava Yovino, and she is a freshman from Parkland, Florida, another midfielder. She basically won practically every award you could in lacrosse in high school. She played at St. Thomas Aquinas High School down there. But she is another example of Coach Tim Shaw being able to spot these recruits and not just bring them to Navy, but they just have like immediate impact. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about as a coach is it's one thing to be able to play at the next level. And then, it used to be, I always thought anyway, okay, freshman year, you kind of learn in the system and all that kind of stuff. You slowly break into the lineup. Not here. I mean, there's freshmen continually just like jumping right onto the field and right away they're making their presence felt. Is that something you can pick up on as a coach in high school? And what are some of the, because I think a lot of it does have to do with the whole mental aspect of the game, right? I mean, how you can basically just stay in that moment and in some cases have a short memory, right? Just put bad stuff behind you and just keep pushing forward. If you could kind of share with me some of your thoughts on what makes the difference between a player who can just play in college and one who you think will be great in college.
Well, I think you nailed the biggest piece of it is the mental aspect, right? It's confidence. And what I find coaching young women is confidence is the factor that makes the difference between, a superstar and a maybe just a team kind of contributor type player. Obviously, all of these girls are going to be physically strong. They're going to be fast. The other aspects of players that stick out are going to be stick skills and lax IQ. So it's not necessarily, can you dodge to goal and beat everybody? Can you, race everybody down the field and score? Can you shoot the hardest? It's going to be, do you know how to read the defense? Do you understand, the picture that's coming in front of you and how to react? Are you looking for your teammates? Are you looking to set up your teammates for success? One of the things about Ava that I've noticed so far is her assists. Mm-hmm. So that means, maybe she wasn't the leading goal scorer in every single game, but she's killing it in assists. So that means she's always got her head up. She's always looking for her teammate and she's always looking to make the play happen.
Right.
And a lot of times you can see that in athletes. A lot of college coaches will tell you they're not looking for the top goal scorer. They're looking for the top assister because they know that her lax IQ is there and she's looking to see how everything's developed and how she can, help someone else get the goal in the net. So I think that's huge.
Right. All right. Good point. We're going to move to an attacker now, and her name is Lily Denton. She is a junior from Nashville, Tennessee. Had a solid season last year, making 12 starts and played in all 20 games. Ended up with 32 goals, which is third on the team. One of the things I wanted to check in with you about her is that, and you kind of touched on this earlier, actually. Denton is somebody who played multiple sports in high school, which is not terribly surprising, but she seemed to really excel, at them. And when you think about these days of sports specialization, the young men and women are playing, they're starting a sport early, and then at some point they just focus on one, and it seems to be happening earlier and earlier. Now, you'd mentioned a couple of really good crossover sports for your athletes that you've worked with in the past. How important is it to have that cross-sport experience, not only just from a physical standpoint, but just basically for the love of the game, maintaining your love of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I see it all the time, this early specialization, and I think that the athletes are doing themselves a disservice. You mentioned the physical aspect of it, right? You're using the same muscles over and over again, but the mental piece again is huge. You want to prevent that burnout, that losing that love of the game. If you want to play 4 years in college, the time not to start only playing that sport is in high school. Mm-hmm. I think it also just develops you as a better athlete when you have those experiences in other sports. I remember coaching a younger team, and it was 7th and 6th graders, and two girls just instinctively did a give and go. And I said, that's because they're basketball players. Mm-hmm. They understand the give and go, the mechanics of it. And we didn't spend hours into practice going, now this is a give and go, things like that. So what you hear a lot of times from the college coaches is they're looking for girls who haven't peaked in one sport. So if I'm only playing lacrosse, by the time I get to college, I probably have gotten as far as I'm going to go in lacrosse. Maybe I get a little stronger. Maybe I get a little faster and learn new things. If I've been playing soccer, I've been playing basketball, and I've been playing lacrosse, and now I'm just going to focus on lacrosse, my game is going to go so much further because I'm going to learn so much more, but bring all those aspects of that other sport into it. I think there's some sports that are probably an exception to the rule. Swimming, I mentioned swimming. If you're not in the pool, it's tough to get better at swimming. Right. That it is what it is, but fortunately it's a non-load bearing or weight bearing sport,
Right.
But I think I encounter it all the time with athletes who and it's other athletes and it's lacrosse athletes who only want to specialize in one sport. And I just disencourage it as much as I can for their whole entire well-being and their success as an athlete.
All right. Those are some good points. And I like what you said about not peaking yet in lacrosse until they hit high school, because you're right. I mean, I think if I'm just visualizing that, you got someone growing up splitting their time between 3 different sports, and then all of a sudden they get to their freshman year and boom, they spend all their time concentrating on this one. I can see how the growth would just be exponential almost. Okay, our next, we're going to talk about 2 defenders together. We're going to talk about, I'm going to mention Athena Karoun, who's a defender, and then also Emma Richardel, who is a goalie. So I wanted to talk about these 2 together. First of all, Athena is a senior. She's one of the few seniors that are starting on the team right now. And last year she finished with 17 ground balls and caused 11 turnovers. So that's a nice stat there. And she's off to a good start this year because I think she's earned some Patriot League Player of the Week honors and things like that, or at least Naval Academy Athlete of the Week honors. Emma is a sophomore goalkeeper who replaced Joe Torres, who unfortunately transferred to Towson. I just heard about that the other day. I was so bummed. I used to call her the human stop sign.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I used to see her stop so many shots just like right there, point blank, And so that's kind of a bummer hearing that news. But anyway, I mentioned these 2 together because of the communication that needs to exist between the goalkeeper and her entire defensive team in front of her, right? So if you could kind of share, and when I played defenseman when I was playing at the club level, and our goalkeeper was just talking nonstop. And I think a lot of people who are new to the game don't really get that. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like for somebody who's new to the game and what that sounds like?
Yeah, definitely. It's huge. It is critical. And, talking about playing at the next level, that's what's going to get you as a goalie to play at the next level, is your ability to communicate with your defense. We always get younger ones who, when they come in their first year, they're afraid to talk. They're afraid to kind of be that outspoken because they're afraid to make a mistake and they're afraid to, kind of lead. So we try to create an environment that's like, hey, I'd rather you be loud and wrong than correct and quiet because nobody can hear you. And the communication of a goalie too, they have such a different sight picture, talk about flying and things like that, than the rest of the team does. If they can communicate what's happening before it's happening or where players need to go, things like that, your defense is going to be so incredibly strong. I'm fortunate at the high school level to have a goalie who does that now. And I know that the younger defenders coming in are like, wow, I've never had that. And it is so amazing to have because it just gives you a much bigger view of what's going on instead of I can see my girl and the 2 girls next to me. But absolutely. And, I listened to one of the products of Leonardtown High School is Katie Greenwood. Her maiden name was Hammer, but she was the Team England goalie this past summer for the World Cup and played for me years ago in Jets and then graduated from Leonardtown High School. And she will tell you that she jumped in the goal just because it was the only way she was going to make the team. But from then on, she had a different view of how the game is played. And I had one of my children in the car say, I think I want to try goalie just so I could see it, just so I could see that picture. But, if Emma can step up and be that for Navy, it's such a bummer that Joe transferred. The transfer portal is a killer for Navy right now. We can talk about that if you want, but if Emma can just step up and be that voice and be that, leader on defense, I think they're going to have a lot of success back there. Yeah.
So it does seem like on both sides, men's and women's side, they seem to be able to produce a goalkeeper in there that, is able to kind of keep things together. And I have no doubt, knowing Coach Timchall's reputation, I have no doubt that it's going to be the case this year. So very good. I'll tell you what, that's going to take us to the end of our conversation as far as the players go. But I did want to circle back and talk a little bit about this new lacrosse facility that just got approved about a month ago. I'm not sure when they're going to start it, but it's supposedly going to be finished up in 2026. Pretty awesome. I mean, I saw the 4
unreal.
The 4 or 6 minute video on that, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's going to completely change not just what it's going to do for Navy lacrosse, but forget about that for a second. Let's just talk about what it's going to do to the Naval Academy skyline. It is huge. But so first of all, it's going in right next to the Glenn Warner soccer facility, which is a terrific venue. But when you see the architect's model of this new lacrosse facility, it's just going to tower over it. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, how do you see that impacting the programs moving forward?
It's unbelievable to me. If they, if it actually goes through and it actually gets built, it just puts Navy lacrosse so far ahead of all the other schools. A Naval Academy graduate and teammate, friend of mine, Jen Baker, is the athletic director at Johns Hopkins. And I've been in that Cordish facility, that Hopkins is known for. And I hate to say it, sorry, Hopkins, but this puts that to shame. And like you mentioned, the Glenn Warner facility, I think it's going to turn a lot of heads and put a lot of athletes, put Navy at the top of a lot of lists for a lot of high caliber athletes. I had people from all over the world who I've known for a long time that were not Navy messaging me, sending me the emails, saying, did you see this? Did you see this? And I had one of two children all of a sudden say, hey, I think I would want to play there. And she's my one who doesn't want to go to Navy. So right. I think that's it's just going to put Navy lacrosse at just a higher level. I think the coaches that you have at Navy have the reputation to be there. Like I mentioned, the transfer portal, I think that's going to be a killer for a few years until we get rid of those COVID extra years and see what happens there. But that should coincide nicely with this facility. And I think there's no limit to where Navy lacrosse is going to go.
Yeah.
I think the program itself has just come so far. We, from the club level back in the 90s, we were, I don't know if you know this, but we were 3-time national champions as a club program back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. But, the Super Bowl flyover had a Navy women's lacrosse player in it.
Yeah.
So for young women who are driven and, excited about playing lacrosse, to say, hey, I can do cool things afterward. I can go fly. I can be in a Super Bowl mm-hmm. flyover. I can, go be a Marine or go, even cyber warfare, which is huge now. There's so many opportunities. So I think that just the complete package of what Navy has to offer has now been escalated with that facility. And I'm just hoping, like, how do I get a membership?
That's right. Really.
I'll pay.
Yeah, because I'm with you when I think about, and I mentioned this briefly on the last podcast in the little Ask Me Anything segment. But when I look at the different sports, the most visible sports at the academy, I think you could say you can make a pretty good case that in the spring it's lacrosse. All right, I mean, there's no question about it. And somebody had asked me, I was a guest on another sports podcast a while back, and they said, "Hey, what sport do you think Navy's got a legit chance of winning, a national championship?" And I did preface it by telling them, well, there's other sports you don't hear about too much, but Navy excels there. Okay, they won a national championship in rugby, and they did in lightweight rowing a couple of years ago, and that sort of thing. But if you're asking me about these sports that are kind of like on the radar all the time, I would have to say both men's and women's lacrosse for these reasons. And I gave them my reasons. This one, the addition of this facility, to your point, I think is going to really just put it into the stratosphere, because now you will have that opportunity to attract more top shelf people. And you said it yourself earlier, there's not necessarily an opportunity to play lacrosse beyond college, but there is an opportunity to do a lot of great things with your life, right? And the Naval Academy is a great pathway to do that. So if you can attract that kind of talent to Annapolis, put them in that facility with the coaching that we have, oh my God, there's no telling what can happen. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So listen, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been great getting to know you and learning about all your different contributions to the women's game. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the women's team does this year. And maybe how about this? If the Army-Navy game is a good outcome, maybe we can circle back for a visit and talk about that game, because I don't want to jinx them.
I know. So. I'm with you. I'm with
But
you.
it's been great having you on, and I look forward to staying connected with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is so much fun. I could talk lacrosse maybe anytime. So have me back anytime. We'll just talk.
All right, sounds good. All right, thanks a lot there, Cynthia.
Thanks.
Okay, coming up next on Navy Sports Central, we have our question of the day and midwatch segments, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for staying with us, everyone. We are set to wrap things up with our question of the day and midwatch segments. First, let's go ahead and check out our responses to the question from our last episode. And if you'll recall, we were talking about the men's lacrosse team. It said the Navy men's lacrosse team. The Navy men's lacrosse team's top three returning point producers are Patrick Skalniak with 48 points, Dane Swanson with 38, and Henry Tolka with 34. And that comes out to be 120 points combined. How many points do you think this trio will put up this season? And here's a little bit of a hint. They had a total of 18 points altogether through 4 games. Your choices were A, less than 110 points, B was between 110 and 120, C was 121 to 130, and then choice D was more than 130. So after checking out all the responses, it looks like the most popular answer was B, which was between 120 and 130. 58% of you went with that one, and that was followed by C, 121 to 130, with 28% going with that option. Next was A, less than 110 points. There were 10% who chose that one. And finally, 4% of you think that these guys will be able to put up more than 130 points. Now, just to give you another update, Skalniak, Swanson, and Tolker have 28 points now through 6 games. And it looks like Xavier Arland has picked up some of that point production. He's got actually 20 points to lead the team so far. So whether or not they get to 120 could be a little bit of a stretch considering how much more of an impact Arline has had so far, but we'll see. In fact, I'd be interested to see what all 4 of them do in terms of total points by the time the season is over. Okay, now it's time for this week's question, and here it is. Navy freshman Ava Yovino has 13 assists in the last 2 games. And those were against both Oregon and Richmond. So far, she's got 27 dimes and 10 goals, so that gives her a total of 37 points. Now, just so you guys know, Kelly Larkin, who is probably one of the greatest Navy lacrosse players ever to step on the field here in Annapolis, she graduated in 2020. In her freshman year, she had 54 goals to go along with 54 assists. So she finished with 108 points. Now, here's your question. If I put Jovino's year-end target number for both goals and assists at 54.5, what are your over-under predictions? A, under on both. B, over on goals, under on assists. C, over on assists, under on goals. Or D, over on both. So take some time to think about that one and get back to me. The question will be posted on the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page later on today. All right, from here, I'm just going to roll right into our midwatch segment. The spring sports season is underway, and I'm going to focus on a couple of tennis players this time. The first is Luke Garner. He is a sophomore from Arnold, Maryland. In fact, his father, Chris Garner, is in his 9th year as a Navy men's tennis coach. Luke also has an older brother, Finn, who's on the team. Anyway, Luke is a left-hander. He had a 21-8 singles record last year. So far this spring, he is 6-3 in singles and 10-1 in doubles. I couldn't find much video on him, but clearly his game has transitioned well to the Division I level. In most sports, it takes some time for players to get used to the increase in the game's speed and power, but that hasn't fazed Garner at all. If he continues his solid play along with the rest of the team, the Mids should be in pretty good position to go deep into the Patriot League tournament, where they are the 2-time defending champions. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at the women's athlete we're going to be focusing on. Her name is Emily Tannenbaum. I think I've mentioned her before in one of the sports updates. She is a sophomore from Commack, New York, and last year she led the team in both singles and doubles victories as a freshman. So here we go again with another freshman making a huge impact right out of the gate. Emily was actually undefeated in singles during the Patriot League schedule last year, and she and her doubles partners were also a perfect 16-0 in dual meets. That actually reminded me of something I heard a long time ago. I used to follow John McEnroe quite a bit when he was in his prime, and I know he doesn't have a great reputation with a lot of people, but one reason I always liked McEnroe is because his hand was always the first one to go up whenever the Davis Cup captain was looking for players to represent the United States in that competition. Some of the other players of the day, especially Jimmy Connors, I was never a big Connors guy, but he was always finding one reason or another not to compete in Davis Cup, and I think to his credit later on he did. But McEnroe was the guy when you're talking about the late 70s into the mid 80s, and he was responsible for a lot of those Davis Cup wins that the United States pulled in during those years. Not only was McEnroe a terrific singles player, but he was the world's best doubles player at the time. And the running joke back then was the number one men's doubles team in the world is John McEnroe and whoever his partner is. So when I got to look at Emily Tannenbaum's record in doubles last year, that's one of the things that popped into my mind. I mean, she's had several partners, 2 or 3 at least, and clearly she's been able to establish some great chemistry with all of them, which is why they are so tough to beat. This year, Tannenbaum's overall record is 20-9, so she is 7-3 in dual meets and 13-6 in tournaments. And that's her singles record, by the way. She is another lefty who can hit some pretty powerful ground strokes. I actually did have a chance to find some video on her on YouTube. This was a couple of years ago when she was still a senior in high school, and she was doing some drills with her coach back in New York. Anyway, the women's team is currently 9-4, and they will begin their Patriot League schedule on March the 25th. Last year, they were favored to make it to the tournament finals, but they did lose in the semis to an Army team that they had beaten just a few weeks earlier in their star match. Tannenbaum figures to play a key role in how far the team will get this year. The Mids have made it to the finals several times since 2013, and they definitely have the talent to bring home the hardware this spring. It's just a matter of closing the deal if and when that time comes. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to spread the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank former Navy women's lacrosse standout Cynthia Lisa from the class of 2000 for joining us today. It was so awesome to have her help me preview the 2023 edition of the Navy women's lacrosse team, and also to get her perspective on the game as a coach. We have been getting a great response to our question of the day, so if you want to jump in on that, just go to the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. I will go ahead and pin it to the top so you won't miss it. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use music from thousands of artists around the world, and those we feature in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.